good morning. Y'all doing okay? Yeah, it's okay to not be okay in this place. I can tell you that. It's okay to show up here and not be okay. I got to tell you, before we jump into the message this morning, I do have something personal I want to share. Today is the 3-year anniversary of my first sermon here at Connection Point. And so, 3 years ago today, I preached a sermon, and if you were here, I don't expect you to remember, but I preached a sermon 3 years ago today on Jesus turning water into wine. And at the end of that sermon, the people made me go through that door and made me sit in a room. They were like, it's time for you, because they wanted to vote on me, right? So me and my family were quarantined to a back room while the church decided whether or not they wanted to keep me. Do you know how nerve-wracking that was? So I'm back there and I'm looking at Sarah like, what did you think of the sermon? Was it good? Do you think it's okay? Like, are we going to be okay here? And my kids are like, are we moving? Like, what's going on? What's the plan? And, we're just kind of all like in this season of like, what's going to happen? And eventually someone knocked on the door and came and got us. And the church voted unanimously to have us come be the pastor here. And I got to walk back in here and the church all clapped for me and we said a few things. And that was kind of the beginning of our journey here at Connection Point. I just want to say 3 years in, man, I have not regretted a single day, honestly. It has been so good here. And the Lord has moved in my life and the life of my family here. He's moved in the lives of many of you. And it's just been really good. And so 3 years in, I want you to know, Lord willing, you're stuck with me for many, many, many more years, okay? So this is our home now. Sydney has become our home, and we love it. So thank you for trusting me. It's an honor to be your pastor. It's an honor to lead a team of amazing pastors. And we're just getting started. And we're seeing God move in ways, and we're dreaming about what that means for our future. And it's a really cool season to be a part of this church, and I'm grateful for it. I'm also grateful, I'm going to say this out loud because it's on video. I'm also super grateful for Alan and Kim Leach, who were the pastors right before I came. Without them, we would not be where we are. And so they laid a foundation that allowed us to build. And so I'm grateful for them as well. So, okay, I'm done. This is my favorite week in like all of my life every time we get to this week, because this week is the beginning of a new series. Anytime we're starting something new, I get excited because we're going in a different direction, right? I got excited for the parables in the summer. I got excited for praying even when it's difficult as we journey through most of September. Today, brand new series. Anybody else besides me just really like change? I love change. I know there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, we could just leave everything the same and I'd be happy. I love sermon series because it moves me somewhere else in Scripture. And so that's what we're doing today. So if you're ready, say I'm ready. All right, let's jump in. We are beginning a brand new series today called Citizens. And it's not by accident that we're doing this series in October. We're doing this brand new series called Citizens because we are going to be wrestling for the next 5 weeks, today and then all of October. We're going to be wrestling with what does it mean to be a citizen of heaven while living on this rock called earth. Because truly, it's not easy. It's not easy to be a citizen of a place that we haven't been, a place called heaven, while living on this place called earth. I don't know if you guys know this, but the earth is a hot mess. Okay? Like, this place all over the world is a hot mess. When I was in Greece back in March, at night I had trouble sleeping, and so I'd turn on the TV. And while you're in Greece, every station is in Greek. Shocker, right? Except for one, and it was BBC, the British Broadcasting Network. And so what it did is it showed me the news of the world in ways I don't get on News Center 7, right? And it was the only time I could listen to people talk in English and actually understand what was happening. And I started to realize how many things are happening around our world that I have no clue about. Where the world is broken and messy. But honestly, America's no better. Let's be honest. This country is broken and messy. And what's happening in our world is trying to take us in a direction that is the opposite direction of Jesus. What's happening in this country, especially over the next 6 to 8 weeks, what's happening in this country is our world is trying to divide us into political parties and have us keep distance from each other at deep, deep levels. You're either here or you're here. And the truth is it's really hard to be a citizen of the kingdom of heaven in a climate like this on earth. So for the next 5 weeks, starting today, we're going to wrestle through hard things about how to live for Jesus in a world that's moving away from Jesus. And it's going to be uncomfortable. But I wasn't hired to make you comfortable 3 years ago, was I? I was hired to push and to help you grow and to help you get closer to Jesus, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to talk about things like how to have courage in a world that's pulling you in the opposite direction. We're going to talk about politics, which I don't do. If y'all been here for 3 years, you know I don't talk about politics, okay? But here, next Sunday, we're gonna dive in, not to where you should land politically, but we are going to dive into how do we as citizens of kingdom of heaven engage a world that's politically divided. We're going to talk about our identity. And we're just going to keep going. Because the truth is that we've got to figure out how to live in this world but still look like Jesus. Okay? Because honestly, just to start, our world continues to move further and further away from Jesus. Is that a surprise to you? That our world continues to move further and further away from Jesus. Everywhere. Okay? We're moving further and further away from Jesus, and it should leave us with the question, if you're a follower of Jesus today, the question you should be asking is this: how do I live as a follower of Jesus in a world that is decaying? In a world that's dying and moving further and further away from him, how do I live as a follower of Jesus in the midst of that? Because man, Tim, if you're telling me I've got to move this direction towards Jesus while the world is moving this direction, then what you're basically telling me is I'm going to be the awkward person in every room. I'm going to be uncomfortable in every space. People are going to look at me differently than they look at everyone else. Is that what you're telling me it means to follow Jesus? Look at me. Yes, that's what I'm telling you. You're not awkward because of your bumper sticker on your car. You're not awkward because everywhere you go you sing hymns. It's not that. It's that your ethic and what culture looks like being a part of the kingdom of heaven is different than what culture looks like being a part of this earth. We are going to wrestle with that, and it starts today. So if you leave today and you feel like, yeah, but where are we, like what are we doing? My response to you is that I did a good job teaching today, because I'm leaving you with something that we're picking up with next week. How do I look like a follower of Jesus and live that way in a world that's decaying? Jesus had disciples who followed him, people who journeyed with him pretty much every day for 3 years. One of the closest that he had was a man named Peter. Peter was always in the room. So Jesus had the 12 disciples around him, and they're talking about stuff, and then he takes just a couple of them or 3 of them away to something else. Peter was always in the group of 3 because he mattered to Jesus in a different way. Peter was a leader among the disciples and became a leader of the early church. And Peter wrote a letter, actually wrote 2, 1st and 2nd Peter. But Peter wrote a letter to churches all throughout the land, especially through Asia Minor. And what he wanted to do was just teach them how to follow Jesus better. And in 1 Peter chapter 2, Peter talks about the opposite thing of being a citizen of heaven. He talks about what that means for us on this earth when he says this in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles. Everybody say foreigners. Everybody say exiles. Okay. As foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. So what's a foreigner? Well, foreigners are people who are journeying through a land that's not theirs. Okay? Anytime you're someplace that's not yours and you're just there and you're journeying through it, you're moving through the land, you're a foreigner. Well, what's an exile? An exile is someone who lives in a land that's not theirs and usually not by choice. They're kind of stuck there. They're stuck in a place that's not their home, and that's where they're being called to live. So the Tim Riley definition of foreigners and exiles is simply this. Oh, I forgot there's a typo. I realized this last service and didn't fix it. Do you know sometimes I have typos up there? Thank you for not like drawing them to my attention all the time. I wrote to live. Do you see that? My bad. I meant to write to live life, okay? To live life and journey in a place that is not your actual home. To live life and journey in a place that is not your actual home. What Peter is saying to the people reading the letter is, hey, y'all, you're living in a place that's not your home. You're journeying through it. Live in a way that honors the Lord. Live in a way that serves Him. Because we have to figure out, we have to embrace the idea that we are a part of two kingdoms at the very same time. There's two kingdoms at play at the same time. One is the kingdom of heaven. If you've said yes to Jesus, you're a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. However, we live on the kingdom of earth. We live in a place because of our bodies and because of the ultimate plan of God. We live in this place called earth. We are a part of this kingdom of earth at the very same time. So what do we do with that? How do we figure that out? I mean, here's what I would say, and I'm just going to say this, and if you want to check out after I say this, you've heard the entire sermon after you hear this one message, this one statement, okay? You ready? Here it is. We are a part of two kingdoms, and you are an exile in one of them. Do you hear me? We're a part of two kingdoms. You are, whether you want to be or not, you are an exile in one of them. You're either with it or you're not. So either you are a part of the kingdom of earth, and because of that, this land called heaven is not your home. Or you're a part of the kingdom of heaven, and this earth is the place where you're exiled. It's one or the other. You can't have both. You can't look, act, live like the world is the most important thing, value the things the world values, and just live out your life that way, and then hope maybe someday me and God will figure it out. You're either a part of heaven as your citizenship, or you're part of earth as your citizenship. And in the economy of God, there is no dual citizenship. You don't get full standing in both. You can't embrace the things of this world and embrace the things of heaven at the same time and think that that's okay. You can go home now. I'm done. The word exile is an important word in Jewish culture because it seems like from the beginning, Jews have been in exile. I mean, if you go back to the book of Exodus, the Jews are exiled into the land called Egypt, and they lived there for like 400 years. They're stuck there. And then eventually they're freed by Moses. They end up in the promised land. They have their own land now where they're no longer exiles. Well, time passes. And as time passes, something else happens. We finally have kings who rule the land, and David is king, and then his son Solomon, and it just keeps going down generationally. Well, eventually, there's a people who come and they take over the land of Israel. They're called Babylon. And when Jews think of exile, they think of Babylon. Why? Because Babylon shows up in Scripture from Genesis all the way to Revelation. If you go back to Genesis chapter 11, you'll hear a story about God telling the people of the earth, I want you to go be fruitful and multiply and scatter through the whole land. And the people's response to that was, so we've got a better idea. Let's just stay close together. Let's be fruitful and multiply and not scatter. You know what else we should do? We should build a tower that shows our power of what we can accomplish. We call that the Tower of Babel, right? In a land called Shinar, which became the city of Babylon. You go all the way to Revelation, and you see that John, as he's writing Revelation, is referring to the powers of this earth that are moving us away from Jesus. He just simply calls them Babylon. And when he calls them Babylon, he's referring to the Roman Empire. He's referring to multiple empires throughout history. But Babylon has always signified the place that is moving in the opposite direction of Jesus. But Babylon's a real place. And we learn about the place called Babylon in the book of Daniel. And so that's where we're going to be for the next few weeks. We're going to be hanging out with Daniel in the book of Daniel. And the reason why is because Daniel was an exile. And his friends, they were exiles in a place called Babylon, and they had to figure out how to live for God in this place that wasn't their home. And so we're going to learn from them over the next few weeks. So let's get going. Daniel chapter 1, verse 1 says this. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Okay? So Jehoiakim is the son of Josiah. And just so you know how far Israel has come off the rails at this point, Josiah is the king. He's a young teenage king at this time, and he ends up being the father of Jehoiakim. Josiah is cleaning out the temple. And as his people are cleaning out the temple, one of his leaders comes to him and says, King, I found something. And he says, what did you find? And he hands him scrolls. And as Josiah goes through the scrolls, he realizes there's a law of God that we are supposed to follow. See, they had come so far off the rails at that point that they didn't even know there was law. They didn't know that God had taught them how to live. And Josiah leads the people back to a relationship with God. But by the time Jehoiakim shows up, his son, they're off the rails again. They're doing it their way. Can you imagine a group of people who say they're going to follow and then they don't? Can you imagine that? We would never do that, would we? We would never say, Jesus, I'm going to do it your way, and then turn around and do it the opposite. Never. So, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. The Lord blessed Nebuchadnezzar to take Jehoiakim. Isn't that crazy? The Lord blessed Babylon to overtake Judah. Now, I know it's dangerous for me to say something like, let me put words in the mouth of God. That's a really dangerous thing to say. And so I thought deeply about whether or not what I was saying could actually voice in different words what God is saying here. But here's what I think God is trying to say. Whether we're in Judah or not, the Jewish people are already in Babylon. See, they're either in Babylon, in Israel, in Judah, because they're already moving in the opposite direction of God anyway, and Babylon is any place that moves in the opposite direction of God, or we just take them to Babylon because that's where they are anyway. Either way, the people of God were living in Babylon. So Nebuchadnezzar besieges Jerusalem. Then it goes on to say, along with some of the articles from the temple of God, let's see. He delivered Jehoiakim of Judah into his hand along with some of the articles of the temple of God. Then these he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. He took things out of the temple and put it into the temple of another God. Nothing? No gasp? No, let's try again. He took things out of the temple of God, like the real God, and put them into the temple of another God. Yeah. So glad you're listening. Yes. Crazy. That's crazy. Goes on to say in verse 3, then the king ordered Ashpenaz, everybody say Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and nobility, young men without physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. So let's go take things from the temple and bring them to our temple. And let's go take people from Israel and let's bring them to Babylon and make them my slaves. I want them to be my slaves, but only the good-looking ones who are smart, right? So King Nebuchadnezzar wanted the good-looking, smart slaves. Goes on to say in the rest of verse 4, he was to teach them, Ashpenaz, was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. He was trying to assimilate them into Babylonian culture, right? Let me brainwash them, spend 3 years teaching them how to be Babylonians, and we can give up all this Jewish nonsense. They'll look and act just like us. 3 years, and finally, they will be in my service. Verse 6. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. We're not only trying to change the way they dress and look and eat and language, we're trying to change their names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. Brand new names, brand new culture, brand new food. They're being assimilated into new identity. Their identity is being taken from them to become Babylonians. And for the next 4 weeks, we're going to see what it looks like to live as exiles in another place that's drawing you into its culture and still live for the Lord at the same time. So, be prepared for the next 5 weeks to be in Babylon. You're in Babylon. But can I be honest with you? You're actually in Babylon. Do you know that? Do you know where we live is Babylon? That no matter who we put in office, no matter what we try to do, no matter how long this country has survived, we have been moving away from the Lord time and time again. We look less and less like God's people. And you can say, yeah, but Pastor Tim, everywhere else is Babylon. We are a Christian nation. Prove it. Prove it. And don't show me the back of our money. Prove it. Prove that this is a Christian nation. Because what I'll tell you is I see time and time again the decisions made by leaders in this country are pulling us away from the Lord, not towards him. Or the opposite is happening. They're trying to do Christian things, but for their own personal gain. Like even the motives aren't healthy. The motives are for votes. It's ugly and messy around this place right now, and we've got to come to terms with the fact that we live in Babylon, and God is calling us to stand out and stand up for him, not for political agenda. Are you with me? We're going to wrestle with this for 4 more weeks, so you better get comfortable, or stay uncomfortable, I guess. But here's the deal for the Jew. Babylon wasn't the end. See, eventually, Babylon gets overtaken by Persia. And the Persians say, hey, Israelite people, you can go home. You can rebuild your walls. You can build a new temple. You can do your thing. Like, go. Just understand that where you live is Persian territory, not Jewish territory. And eventually the Persians get overtaken by the Greeks. Maybe you're familiar with the name Alexander the Great. Right? They get overtaken by the Greeks in the 2nd century BC, like 160, 170 BC. They get overtaken by the Greeks, and the Greeks are now in charge of Israel. They're still exiles while they live in Israel. It's not their land. It's not their home. And culture is being put on them by outside forces. Eventually, Alexander the Great dies. There's a period of time where things get weird. But on the other end of that, we end up with the Roman Empire, now in charge of Israel. They're still exiles. And it's this culture that Jesus grows up in, this Roman Empire culture is where Jesus grows up in these disciples, and it's the lens through which they write the New Testament. But What I think the disciples are trying to tell us and what Jesus was trying to prepare us for is that because we are citizens of heaven, following a Jesus waiting for his return, we're in exile till it's over. We're just exiled people. It's just who we are. We're always going to be out of place. This world will never be our home. It's always going to be uncomfortable. And if we do it right, people are going to look at us weird sometimes. But church, embracing our exile is part of following Jesus. Embracing our exile, understanding that we weren't made for this place, is part of following Jesus. This world is temporary. Everything in it is temporary. Jesus is eternal. We're exiles here until we're outside of these bodies and we can go be with our Father in heaven. I also want you to hear that as followers of Jesus, we are citizens of heaven living on earth. It's just the way it is. And there's a tension that exists between being a citizen of heaven on this earth that we've got to come to terms with. Following Jesus creates tension. It's uncomfortable. Because what is success if we don't define it by this earth? If we don't define success by this earth, what is it? What is wealth if we don't define it by this earth? What, are you telling me Jesus has different views of success and wealth? Yes. What is family if it's not just the simple definition of this earth? The tension that exists between what God defines things as and what the world defines things as are in constant tension. What is marriage if it's not defined by this world? How does God define marriage? See, there's a tension that always exists if you are trying to live out what it means to follow Jesus in this world. And if you're not experiencing that tension at all, I'm not sure you're following him. I'm not trying to be mean or rough on you. I'm just being honest. That if you're a citizen of heaven and you're not embracing his definition of things and what it means to look the way he wants you to look, if you're not moving that direction at all, I'm not sure what you're doing. It sounds like you're just going to church. Let's go back to 1 Peter chapter 2. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desire which wage war against your soul. Verse 12, live such good lives among the pagans. Pagans being defined as people who are citizens of this earth. Okay? Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of wrongdoing, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. It doesn't say if they accuse you of wrongdoing, it says though they accuse you of wrongdoing. It doesn't say it could happen, it kind of says it will. See, if you're living separate as an exile, you will be accused of wrongdoing. People will look at you and think things about you that aren't true because you make them uncomfortable. And God is calling us to live differently. He says, though they accuse you, there's no leg to stand on. Let me give you a practical example of that, because I don't mean like accuse you of like doing terrible things to people. When I first got into ministry, I was a youth pastor. And I was leading a youth group for about 7 years. And our youth group was flourishing and healthy, and I loved it. For the record, I'll never be a youth pastor again, because I got to be in bed by like 10, or I'm not okay. Like, I don't know how youth pastors stay up late. I don't know how they do it anymore. I remember 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning at like all-nighters, like still playing basketball and I'm like, man, I would die. I would be exhausted, and I would have pulled a hamstring already, for sure. But I remember being a youth pastor, and I remember our youth group just growing exponentially in those first 2 years. And I remember people walking in the door whose lifestyle and understanding of what it means to live a healthy life were very different than what the church would say. And I remember we got to a point where we had about 150 students every single week. And there was a small group of 5, 10, 15 students who were coming every week, who had same-sex attraction, and were living out a lifestyle of homosexuality. And they were there every week. They were involved every week. They started inviting their friends who were also gay. And now I got this little cluster of homosexual students who are showing up every week and listening intently, but not leaving that lifestyle at all. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this is interesting. I don't know. My first thought was honestly, this is great. Because what it tells me is that we're healthy. That people who don't even live like Jesus feel comfortable here, right? And so they were involved in small groups. They were involved with people. There were people who met with them privately. It was all kinds of stuff. And I just remember one Wednesday night, I was in my office preparing my lesson for that night, and they all walked in together. And it felt like an intervention, and I wasn't sure what the intervention was about. They all walked in, and they said to me, hey, can we talk to you? I'm like, yeah. And they all just kind of sat down in chairs around my office. I said, what's up, guys? What's going on? And they said to me, we just have one question. Why do Christians hate us? And I thought to myself, that's a really interesting question. And at first, I wasn't sure what to say. And then I asked them a question in response. And I meant it sincerely. Do you think I hate you? And they're like, no, you're awesome. But Christians do. And I said, do you think your small group leaders hate you? Well, no. And my wife was really involved with this group of girls especially. I said, do you think Sarah hates you? No. Aren't we Christians? Yes. So what's going on? And the response was, yeah, you're Christians, but you're not those Christians. Because Christians hate us. At school, anywhere we go, we've come across Christians, they just hate us. See, here's the thing. When I attach Christ to myself as a believer, as a Christian, there are things people think about me immediately because I'm a Christian. Why would this group of people think Christians hate them? A couple reasons. One, because that's the stuff they've been fed by the world. The world says, don't do that, Christians will hate you. But here's the other thing, Christians have probably actually hated them. People who've attached their name to Christ have probably spewed hate, and we're just as guilty as the world is, truthfully. It was awesome to journey with them. It was awesome to see some of them get baptized, see some of them fall in love with Jesus, figure out what that looks like in their life. But I was accused of something that wasn't true about me simply because I attached myself to Jesus. The world has opinions about who we are as believers because we fed them some nonsense and they fed themselves some nonsense. Though they accuse you, be people who rise above that and aren't what they accuse you of. Live differently. See, if we are living separate as an exile, you'll be accused of wrongdoing. Our lives, however, should look different, not because we act like we're better than other people, but because we love deeper. It's not because we've got it all figured out and we're these perfect little people who go to church and we don't make bad choices and we don't cuss or drink or we don't do all these things and look how the way we live. It's not that. That's not what makes us Christians. What makes us Christians is when we love deeper than the world around us. When we look people in the eyes who we have nothing in common with, and we can still see that they were made in the image of God. When we look at a world that's broken, when we look at people who would spit on us, and we can see the image of God in them. Because whether you're gay or straight, the image of God is in you. Oh, y'all, wake up. Wake up. I'm serious. Every human on the face of this earth was made in the image of God. So if you are gay or straight, you are made in the image of God. if you're Republican or Democrat, you are made in the image of God. Anything this world tries to divide us with, when we love deeper, we understand that it's not about what separates us. It's about being made in the image of God and pointing people back to a citizenship that lasts forever and is no longer temporary. It's so much bigger than we live it out. See, we live differently. We love Jesus, which doesn't make us better than other people. It makes us have to love deeper. We have to love deeper than anyone else on the face of this earth can love. Every week, we do these things called car conversations. And it's just simply an opportunity to carry the discussion in the car on the way home. You can also do that with your kid because they're learning similar content. I doubt they had a conversation about homosexuality, but they're learning similar content in our children's areas, okay? And the two questions for today are simply this. The first one is this: do I actually feel like I'm an exile? When you're journeying on this earth, are you looking around going, I don't think I belong here? This feels weird. Man, the things I want to be for Jesus and the things this world is asking of me, I feel tension. Do you feel it inside of yourself? Or do you feel like, no, I'm good. I'm good with what this world offers, and I'm embracing that, which is your choice. Do you feel like an exile on this earth? And the second is this: does my life tell the world around me that I'm a citizen of heaven? So one, do you feel that way? And two, do others see it in the way you live and in the way you love? Do others see that you're different? Let me help you. That doesn't mean you wear a cross necklace and you go around showing everybody that you love Jesus. It's the way you love people. There are so many people in this world with bumper stickers on their car about Jesus, or the little fish, right? The little fish on their car, or a really interesting Christian t-shirt, or a cross necklace, listening to K-Love, forwarding and sharing every single cool little Jesus thing they find on Facebook, and they're spewing hate at the exact same time. And I'm over it. Because they call themselves a citizen of heaven, but they're really just embracing the hatred of this world. Does the world around you know that you have a citizenship that's not of this world by the way you love? The bottom line today is simply this. The bottom line is we are a part of two kingdoms, but only one can be your home. We're a part of two kingdoms, but only one can be your home. You only get to choose one place to be the place that you call home. So let me tell you what that looks like in my life. I remember being in my mid-20s, and I remember being at church every Sunday. Man, I love church. I sang on worship team. I loved worship music. I'm listening to stuff in my car every day. My friends all went to church with me, right? And I remember the worship pastor coming up to me one week and saying to me, hey, I need your schedule for when you're going to be available in the fall to sing on worship team. Well, not only was I involved in worship at the church, but I was also a Cleveland Browns season ticket holder at the same time. And I remember pulling out my phone and sending her the schedule for the Cleveland Browns. If there's an H next to the game, that's a home game, I won't be here. And she was like, oh. I'm like, man, I paid so much for these dumb tickets. I'm going every week. And so that was my schedule. Y'all, I went up to every game. I think we lost every one. For like 2 straight years is how it felt. And Sarah and I would drive home from the game, and I would say, why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we drive up so far, pay so much money to watch them lose, right? And we'd stop and try to like eat our sorrows away at a restaurant. And then we'd head home, and I'd wake up Monday morning angry. But I didn't care, because I love my Browns. I mean, I love church, but I love the Browns. I remember sitting in the pew while the pastor was preaching. And I remember checking my fantasy football lineup every week and spending more time in my phone, and I wasn't listening to a single thing that man was saying. But I love church, right? Like, I love it. I remember making fun of the way people worship during songs, like sitting there in my early mid-20s, like when I'm sitting in a pew and trying to determine, is someone going to lift one hand, two hands, close their eyes, put their hands in their pockets? Will their hands be like this or will they be like this? And just being really like making a little game for myself of how people worship. I remember one Sunday, my favorite band at the time was Coldplay, it's my favorite non-Christian band, I guess. And they were releasing a new album on a Sunday morning. And I remember having an earbud in with my phone down here, listening to the new album while worship was going on in the room. Am I a citizen of heaven? Doubtful. You want to know why? Because everything of this earth was way more important to me. Sitting next to my girlfriend in youth group, right, over here on the side, having our own little youth section, sitting next to her, trying to figure out how to hold her hand quickly, right? That was more important than listening. The worship didn't matter to me. I just wanted to get home and get football on. Like, man, that's my story. And my guess is some of you have stories that are similar, where you show up to church, but you're not really here. Maybe for you, it's just about checking the box that you came. Congratulations. Congratulations to you and to 25-year-old Tim. We went to church. But let me tell you, it changed nothing about my life. Nothing. I spent all my time being a version of myself that I didn't like, and wondering what was wrong with me because I was doing the church thing and I love Jesus, so why am I not changing? Why am I not growing? And just finally throwing in the towel and say, I give up. See, you can call yourself a citizen of heaven. You can act like you got it all figured out. You can show up, you can wear your nice clothes, you can greet at a door. That's great. But honestly, we're going to spend the next 5 weeks trying to come to terms with the fact that we don't belong here. And that there's a tension that we should live with every single day that says we don't belong here. And we should look at people in this world through a lens that doesn't make sense to the world. We add words in front of the word Christian that don't belong there. If you're white in this room, you are not a white Christian, you're a Christian. If you are black in this room, you are not a black Christian, you're a Christian. If you're a Republican Christian, you are not a Republican Christian, you are a Christian. Ready? If you're a Democratic Christian, you are not a Democratic Christian, you are a Christian. We put these labels in front of the word Christian to help separate us when we all just need to come to terms with the fact that we have the same citizenship. And we're all on a journey, and we're trying to figure it out, and some of us may be more lost than others. But man, when you give your heart to a citizenship in heaven, there should be a tension in this world that says anything that divides us is unnecessary and unneeded. There's not levels of citizenship in heaven, there's just citizenship. And that makes us exiles on this planet. So all that should leave you with a question. And the question is simply this: what does it look like to be a citizen of the kingdom of God? I'm with you, Tim, I get it. I know you're starting a new series. What does it look like to be a citizen of the kingdom of God? We're going to spend the next 4 weeks laying that out. What it looks like to have kingdom courage in the face of trials. What it looks like to have kingdom politics that don't resemble the world. What it looks like to have a kingdom identity where you see yourself and others through a different lens. We're going to wrestle with it. And you may not like me for it. And I'm okay with that. Because I think it's where God's taking us. Let's learn how to live in this world with the tension that's supposed to be there.